Hello and welcome to Saturday Sketch Club. My name is Will Iron and this is Jake Garfield, and we are here on site at the Royal Academy of Arts in our Claw Learning Centre. As ever, these are artist-led drawing workshops, very much aimed at all experience levels. All you're going to need today is a pencil and paper, but of course if you'd like to work with other medium, do feel free to use those. As ever, please do share your work with us throughout the session. We'll have an opportunity at the end to look at some of your drawings. You can do this using the hashtag RA Sketch Club on Twitter and Instagram, or by uploading images to the Facebook group Saturday Sketch Club. Use the chat, say hello. If you have any questions, either for me or for Jake, then do put them in the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring that throughout, so we'll try and get back to as many of you as possible. We're going to be working with a life model today, Lydia, who we'll meet shortly. Usually, if we were doing on-site life drawing, we would work with a fully nude model. However, Lydia will be partially covered. Today's artist tutor is Jake Garfield. Jake is a wonderful artist who works predominantly in drawing and also in printmaking. And Jake is currently working towards a show at 5AA Gallery in Dulwich. So if you are in London, then do look out for that in September. Jake's also been a long-term collaborator of our learning team here at the Royal Academy. So Jake, we're so pleased that you're joining us today. Do you want to kick us off and tell us a bit about what we're doing today?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Will. All right, so today's session, as Will was saying, is a figure drawing workshop. We're really lucky to have Lydia with us, a model I've worked with plenty before. Basically, we're going to be breaking down drawing into its kind of building blocks. Just like, imagine an athlete in a gym is going to isolate their muscle groups, work on different things individually before bringing them all together for their kind of main event. This is all about taking different aspects that make up a drawing, the formal qualities of drawing, working on exercises one by one. So hopefully later on you can combine these in your work. Okay, so let's get started with our first activity, as time is of the essence. This is going to be super quick, okay, guys? And do you know what? For all of these initial activities, we've got 3 kind of super quick warm-ups. You can spend months on a single artwork, so this is really no time to be precious at all. If you've got cheap paper, just printer paper, newsprint, anything like that, that you can just think of as a throwaway material, then absolutely use that. All right, first activity, Life Drawing Classic, is a continuous line drawing. So once your pencil or whatever drawing material you've got hits the page, it's not coming off, okay?
And you've got 4 minutes for this, yeah?
4 minutes.
Fab.
And just because it's a continuous line drawing doesn't necessarily mean that you're drawing just outlines or that you're just drawing contours. If you really think about the way that you look at things, you don't just your eye doesn't just follow the outline of someone's head or the outline of an object. You kind of dart around, you go in, you see someone's facial expression, you go out, you notice their body language, you notice the setting. So you may want to reflect that in the way that you're drawing. And this is all about energy. It's literally 4 minutes, guys. There's no time to be a perfectionist. There's no time to be precious. It's about getting those initial drawings just out of your system. If you can get something to indicate the context of where Lydia is, something to put your figure that you're creating into some sort of a setting, even just like one little line is so simple to indicate where the floor meets the wall, and that's enough to, in the viewer's mind, to imagine a whole space. Also, you've got such a fantastic shadow for this one, could be a really useful thing for kind of suggesting the space that Lydia is occupying.
Jake, with continuous line drawing, if you find yourself at one end of the drawing, but you haven't filled in another end, do you have any sort of top tips for how you get there?
I'd say dart across. Don't worry about drawings into lines intersecting other ones. It only kind of adds to the drawing. Don't feel like you have to kind of work your way back like you're making an Etch-a-Sketch and go over the lines that you've drawn. And you can always go lighter and heavier with your marks. So you maybe you want to dart across kind of faintly. I think that shadow is really something that it would be a crime to completely ignore.
About halfway through, so we've got 2 minutes left of this continuous line drawing.
And these are all drawings rooted in observation. And a general rule is you might want to be looking at your subject, really just looking, not making a mark for 2-3 seconds, taking in information, and then quickly jotting down that mark, then quickly back up. So by the end of this session, you're next going to be all tight from your kind of workout of constantly looking at your subject, which is Lydia on the screen, looking at your page, looking at your subject, looking back at your page, looking at your subject.
So Christine said, line drawing means you can take your pencil off the paper if you do it quickly. But no, you need to keep it on if you can.
Nice try.
About a minute left.
So you don't want to get bogged down with eyelashes and fingernails in any of the drawings today, actually. I was going to say any of the warm-ups, but to be honest, they're all fairly quick drawing exercises. So you want to think about broad brush strokes and the general kind of shapes rather than getting kind of too bogged down with details. You know, one way that I think is really valid is you can even start sort of in the middle and just build outwards like a spider's web.
And that is time.
All right, so no time to dwell on any of these. Discard that paper. You can rip it up if you want. We're not being precious about these. We're moving on to our next one, which, again, we haven't got any longer. And actually, this one, I'd say, maybe even one of the most challenging of the whole day. So absolutely don't put too much expectation on this drawing. But we're going to be focusing now on movement. So it doesn't have to be a continuous line drawing anymore. But you might find that the kind of energy that you were forced to generate by drawing rapidly and going back and forth between different sections of your drawing might be something you want to carry over. So it doesn't have to be continuous line drawing, but by all means, if that's how you want to do it, then stick with it. So Lydia is going to walk super slow motion from one end of your screen to the next. And it's kind of up to you how you want to somehow, in a 2D still image, communicate the fact that this figure is moving along in space. So in a way, there's two things that are really challenging, because you're talking about a figure moving in space, but also that implies a kind of duration of time. So somehow you've got to get a whole period of time frozen into one image.
All right, so we've got 6 minutes on this, starting now.
So you're going to have to work super quick, okay? No time to get everything perfect. And you might decide that you want multiple figures to show how Lydia is kind of moving along the space. Or maybe it's one figure where it's just the limbs that are kind of moving, like you're getting that Vitruvian Man sort of thing, where you've got a figure with multiple legs and arms. Some of you may know like the work of Edward Muybridge, the kind of photographic work documenting figures in motion. That was big influence on like Marcel Duchamp, descending a staircase, multiple kind of figures kind of overlapping each other. And again, I'd say you kind of don't want to completely ignore the space that Lydia is in. Even if you're just kind of hinting at it with a few kind of gestural marks, that can give the viewer a real sense of there being some sort of space, and they'll use their imagination to kind of do the rest of your drawing for you.
And there are different ways of doing this movement drawing, isn't there? We've had someone, we did a movement class the other day, and someone was doing some quick stick figures to illustrate the movements.
Absolutely, I think stick figures are more than legitimate approach to this.
And Imelda's just linked in the chat to the Moy bridges that we have in the RA collection. Yeah.
If you find that you've kind of got multiple figures in kind of similar positions, then maybe now's the time to really think, okay, well, I'm going to catch Lydia. Just catch that thigh while it's in the air. Or whatever the position that you kind of haven't got much. Get that bit, and then maybe her torso is going to be in a similar position when she's moving on. So catch the most kind of fleeting part while you can.
It's about halfway through, so you've got 3 minutes left of this.
What can be really interesting as well is it could be that you have that kind of line where the wall meets the floor and it's kind of consistent throughout the drawing. But if you're drawing multiple figures, who says they have to be completely in line with each other? Maybe you've got some slightly raised, some slightly lower. You could have some aspects slightly bigger. So you kind of might be creating a kind of composite drawing. You can have the drawing in both directions overlapping each other, or maybe there's kind of a circular motion or two rows of top row of Lydia drawing left to right, and maybe the bottom row of Lydia walking the other way. And all these activities are kind of designed to work just pencil on paper, but if you have preferred medium, then please use it. And actually, I'd be really intrigued to see if people approach this in different ways. For instance, if you're working with something like watercolor, maybe that lends itself to a more slow and contemplative approach, that it will produce such a different effect to something where you can just put marks down really directly, really quickly. Imagine you have like a dip pen or something like that, that there's a kind of bit more of a process every time you make a mark.
Sharmin's saying that they're using pen, and Christine is saying they're superposing different colours into theirs.
All right, look forward to seeing those in the sharing session at the end.
Got about a minute left on this one. All right, and that is time. Thanks, Lydia.
All right, so again, we're not dwelling on these. We're not looking at them. We don't have time to stop. We don't have time to judge. We're going to move into our third and kind of final warm-up before we kind of have a tiny sort of mini-ish sort of break. And then we've kind of got a slightly longer, slightly more extended pose after that. So first thing I'd like you to do, just draw a line to the side, maybe about sort of 2 inches to the side of your page. And you're just going to divide that little strip that you've created into 3 boxes. And these boxes are for you to put 3 different sorts of marks down. I'm going to do 3 that spring to mind. Yours don't have to be the same as mine at all. But basically, we're trying to create as much variation as possible. So I'll show you what I mean. You can have dots, dashes, cross-hatching, hatching, big marks, small marks, heavy marks, light marks, hard, direct, straight, industrial marks, and ethereal, flowing, smoke out of a chimney marks. So this is my sort of library of marks that I'm creating, but as I said, don't feel like yours have to be like this.
Do you want to elaborate on industrial marks?
Industrial, I'm talking about, I'm just trying to think of extremes here. Imagine, a hard steel joist, a hard beam. Maybe you're drawing it like properly hard. You can even hold your pencil like in a fist grip rather than in your drawing style, and just super hard, super mechanical, like a robot is doing your drawing. And then maybe to create as much contrast as possible, you want something that you're just hardly holding the pencil. So I could just hold it with these 2 fingers, and I'm not putting any pressure down. It's just kind of the weight of the pencil, basically.
Great. So everybody should have their 3 boxes, their 3 library of marks. And what are we going to do with these libraries of marks?
All right, so next drawing, you're only allowed to use these 3 marks, which means we're really, really focusing on mark making, visual textures. We're not worried about proportions. We've got enough juggling balls in the air already. We don't need to make sure that head is exactly the right size for that body and that arm is exactly the right length. We're really just thinking about dots, dashes, the different sorts of marks that you've got, and you're kind of building, you're constructing your figure from those 3 marks only. And we've got about
7 minutes?
6 minutes, 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
We're being extra kind. Such a fantastic pose. I mean, great shadow again. And those kind of 3 verticals of Lydia's 2 legs and arm. So you may approach it differently, but I'm kind of just starting with my dots, because that's one of my marks, and I'm just kind of seeing where it goes. In a way, I'm working a little bit similarly to how I would with my continuous line drawing, because I'm kind of taking the line and seeing kind of how the drawing will develop.
People are really enjoying the exercise in the chat.
I'm glad. And maybe you want to save, if you've got some lighter marks, like I've got a kind of wispy line, as well as these kind of hard hatching sort of parallel lines, that I'm going to maybe save those harder lines for a bit later on in the drawing. And then I kind of don't have to commit. I can just kind of feel my way around it. Keep things, it's nice, light. The fact that it's light means that you can draw over it. But also the fact that it's kind of wispy means that you don't have to commit to a particular line in a particular place. You can just kind of leave it a bit ambiguous, and then you're kind of keeping your options open. And in a way, this is quite a good way to bring in the sense of touch. You know, you're working in a visual medium, you're creating something for people to look at, but maybe with the marks you use, you can communicate something. You know how different a wall feels to human hair, to the texture of wooden floor, to the texture of a yoga mat. It feels so different. Maybe you can communicate something of the way those things feel with your choice of the mark that you use to draw them. And my advice is, if you are including something of the space that Lydia's in, then don't wait for the end to add that, because that's really useful. It's almost like scaffolding. It's really useful to help figure out where everything's going to go. Those strands of hair just falling down. How can you communicate how different they are compared to that kind of strong arm coming down next to it?
And about halfway through.
So as we're just over the halfway point, maybe now you're going to bring out the kind of the big guns. Maybe now you're going to start to get a bit darker, a bit more sort of clarity and decisiveness, maybe, if you've kind of left things a bit open. Maybe now you want to kind of really commit to certain aspects of the drawing.
Do you have any tips on getting proportions right, and how important is that in this exercise?
Well, I would say if it's taking up a lot of your headspace, I would say just absolutely don't even worry about getting everything right. We'll have a kind of a bit longer in the next activity to kind of focus on proportions, and I've got kind of few tips. But I would say maybe you want to kind of be thinking about not just drawing where Lydia is, but maybe thinking about what shapes you can see in the negative space. Think about those kind of, that arc underneath Lydia's chest, in between her leg and her arm. Maybe it's easier to get that kind of general shape than it is to kind of somehow measure things perfectly by following just the edge of her body and kind of working your way around. Maybe you want to think about the whole shape, kind of breaking down Lydia into these kind of simplified forms. And then, if you've got time, you can always get more specific with it later on.
Got under a minute left. Well done, Lydia.
I mean, if you couldn't tell already, we're working with a pro in Lydia. Such amazing, strong kind of shapes here.
30 seconds on this pose. And that is time. You're well done. Thank you. Thanks, Jake. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute pause. So we'll reconvene at around 11:05. If you want to sort of move away from your drawings, put the kettle on, you're very welcome to. Now it's also a great time to share your work, again, using that hashtag RA Sketch Club on Twitter or Instagram or in the Facebook group. In the meantime, I'm going to ask some of the questions that have come through from you guys. If you have any other questions that you want to put in for Jake, do let me know. Somebody was asking about picking up on the fact that we've had quite a few of these sketch clubs looking at continuous line drawing, and whether that's sort of whether it's sort of a trend in drawing or whether it's something that you find particularly useful and why necessarily. Is that?
Yeah, I would say it's certainly like a life drawing class classic. Particularly, I'd say maybe more as warm-ups, but if you think about maybe people like Giacometti or Henry Moore, there's people who make amazing drawings and they've kind of got this amazing life and electricity and a kind of wiriness about them. I think it is quite good because it's not, if you're constantly got loads of lines, a bit like I was saying by using those kind of wispy marks, you can kind of just keep the drawing open and you can keep it as a kind of act of discovery the whole time, and you can say belly button's over there, no, I'll move it over here, actually now I'm looking more, because you're kind of drawing so rapidly, there's so many lines kind of all over the place that you can kind of build the drawing up that way.
Absolutely. So obviously, as well as drawing, you work a lot in printmaking. You make some really beautiful woodcuts. Presumably this sort of mark making is something that's very transferable. Do you, when doing drawings, do you think about that transferring into print and vice versa? How does that relationship work within your work?
Yeah, absolutely. In printmaking, there's so many strange processes that printmakers have kind of taken from different industries. Like over the years, there's stuff people use like bitumen for the roads, and this blue like photosensitive emulsion that was made for computer chips. We kind of like steal it all, and with that means you get like so many different ways that you have to figure out how to use this to put the marks down. So for instance, if you're working with something like dry point or hard ground etching, it can be a very linear thing, so like those continuous line drawings. But if you're working with something like aquatint, which is another kind of process kind of related to etching and can be combined with etching, then it's often much more about thinking about tone, thinking about lights and darks, think about different areas of shade. Personally, with my woodcut, everything is kind of quite binary. You're either cutting something away or you're leaving it. So you're really thinking in terms of lights and darks.
And we'll be looking at a bit of tone after this, in the next bit. Moira's asking about what is the best way to practice when someone doesn't have a model available? And also thanks for a great session.
If you're not too self-conscious, there's always a mirror available, or even like the reflection on your Zoom screen. But although actually, I think a mirror is better because it's not kind of broken down into pixels and then regurgitated up for you. It's direct, it's alive, it's cheap, it's always available. So that would be my hot tip.
Susan's asking about what pencils you use or what you recommend.
I'd say, especially for these kind of quick warm-up ones, get soft pencils. I think this is 5B. It's just kind of a bit more sort of freeing. It's like a bit more juicy. It's really satisfying to draw with. You can still push down lightly, with it. So you still have a kind of range of marks there. As soon as you get into the 2H, 3H, 4H, it's great if you want to get really technical and kind of, do absolutely super fine shading, things like that. But for these ones, definitely stick with the softer ones. Get yourself a nice juicy 5B or something.
And leading on from that, Christina's asking about if you could say something about how you hold your pencil.
Oh well, this is not a hot tip that I learned from a kind of master draftsman. It's just how I grew up, and it's the same when I write. And it's not actually the necessarily the best way or the way that you got the most control. But it's just for some reason, rather than kind of hold it right near the tip like everyone else, I've just kind of grown. Rather than move it with the tips of my fingers, I kind of move my fingers back and forth and move my wrist along. But I've been doing that since the age of 3, and it wasn't necessarily like a kind of master plan for when I became an artist later on. But yeah, it's the way I hold a pencil.
So I know that in a lot of your art education, when you do workshops around practical art, you also build in elements around some philosophical debate and discussion. Can you maybe say a little bit about that and how that sort of comes up in your workshops?
Yeah. So there's kind of, I'd say maybe 3 different elements, which actually I think they're the best when you actually combine them all together. But often, you'll be doing one of the 3, and one of them is practical things like this, drawing, printmaking. Another one is philosophical inquiry. So it's really great. It's like non-hierarchical learning. Everything comes from the participants. It's done in schools. It's done in communities. It's done in prisons. It's done in lots of ways that it always cuts out bullying. It develops critical thinking skills. It develops listening skills, because everything comes from the group and you're always responding to what the group say. And you can take any stimulus. You can start with an artwork, you start with video, start with a story, anything. And you kind of use that as your springboard for a discussion. And then the third thing, which is kind of similar to that, is like art-based inquiry, where, for instance, at the RO, we might go around an exhibition, and I'll have a few bits of historical information and a bit of context up my sleeve. But basically, I'm doing a tour by asking questions, and I'm saying, what do you think the artist's relationship was to this subject? What clues are there in this work to tell you that, they might be lovers, or they might be enemies, or whatever it is?
Fab, time for one more question, and then we'll get back to it. And it's from Nicoletta, and asking about what inspired you to start drawing.
Oh my God.
If you have an answer for that, don't worry if not.
I feel like it's just something. It's a very direct way of relating to the world. It's like, it's like pre-language almost. You can pre-verbal language. You can, especially like pencil to paper or something like that. Like you can just explore your subject and kind of better understand your subject in a very kind of instinctive way. And I really think, it can be a super sort of intellectual activity as well. Just if you do like a hard line, that could mean you're angry, or it could mean something's close to you, or it could mean it's dark, or it could mean a million things all at once. And that's just one line, one mark.
Yeah, no, absolutely, brilliant. Thank you so much, and I think let's get back to it. So let's kick off with our next exercise.
Okay, so this is our big main event, but this is a short workshop. Okay, those ones were were absolutely rapid, those warm-ups at the beginning. But this is still quite short, okay? Like, I'm telling you, people spend years on single drawings. So it's not about changing your mindset just because we now have 15, 20 minutes rather than 7. You want to be working as quickly as possible and as kind of unpreciously as possible. All right, first thing you're going to do, just like the mark-making drawing, is you're going to draw a line to the side of your paper, and then in your strip, you're going to divide it up into 3 boxes. But unlike the mark-making one, rather than putting dots and dashes or the different kind of library of textures, we're going to be thinking about tone, we're going to be thinking about lights and darks, we're thinking about shades, highlights, and shadows. So the first box, you can leave that. That will be the white of your paper. That will be the lightest tone in your drawing. Assuming you're working with light-colored paper, I'd be interested to see if anyone happens to be working on colored paper, brown paper or black paper or anything. Okay, the middle one, you're going to shade in a mid-tone grey. So, just lean the pencil to the side so you're getting a kind of a soft edge. And then the final box, you're going to kind of fill it in as dark as you can get with your drawing materials. And if you have multiple softnesses of pencil, then you can always use your 7B for this one and your 2B for the middle one or something like that. If you're working with ink, then maybe you want to mix some water in and create a kind of wash for your mid-tone. And then you can just go straight for your darkest box. Let me straighten that up for you. Okay, so this is going to be our key that we're going to refer back to the whole time that we're making this drawing. And we're going to ask ourselves, whatever thing that we're drawing in, is it closest to the lightest tone, the mid-tone, or the darkest? We're not having any middle ground between those things. Okay, you're reducing it, you're simplifying it for this drawing. But before we get into using this tone, because we're being extra kind, unlike the mark-making exercise, we've got just 5 minutes just to do a kind of linear sketch of our model, just to get a sense of where things are, so it's not just drawing kind of areas of black into nothingness. We're just going to kind of get our general composition down. And you've got 5 minutes, so you actually got less time for this first bit of the drawing than you had for those initial exercises. Just going to trade out my pencil for a sharper one. All right.
So 5 minutes on this one, and it's, as you say, the line drawing. And we'll fill it in, as it were, later on. Brilliant.
So don't worry about lights and darks at all. Don't worry about tone. We're just worrying about where the figure is. And again, this one has such great shapes with the negative space. There's kind of so many triangles in there. And it's so much easier to see a triangle and to get that kind of shape down than it is to kind of somehow measure as if you were like an ant walking across Lydia's wrist and down her back and somehow guess that perfect. It's so much easier to just block things off into shapes if you can. So I might just start with getting a triangle here where the body meets the mat. And you just want to be working really lightly here because you want to, just like the other ones, you want to give yourself the opportunity to change your mind and to correct things. I really, really, really would encourage you to get that mat in, to get that shadow in, and also just that line where the floor meets the wall. It's really useful in getting your proportions right for your figure, but it also means within that drawing.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this is the line drawing that's basically our sort of vehicle, which we'll then use on tone later on.
Just line for now, 5 minutes, and then we'll be bringing in the lights and darks later on. So forget about that key that we just drew, just for a minute, and we'll get to that. And you know, if you want to stick with one of those kind of restrictions that those drawings had in the morning, making this a continuous line drawing or something like that, you are more than welcome, but you are not obliged to.
About halfway through this initial line drawing,
And you know, we're doing this to help ourselves out, but it doesn't mean that this is a kind of the most important part of this drawing. Okay, this is just something as a kind of basic kind of framework before we start to think about tone.
about a minute left on this one. Someone's saying that using the mat as a reference point has been a revelation.
Yeah. Well, you've got Lydia to thank for that. she can visualize it.
Yeah.
It is really useful because it's such a, just having a rectangle there as a kind of reference point,
Yeah.
because it's a simple geometric shape, that you can really get a sense, you can really see the kind of perspective, the way it kind of comes outwards at either of the corner, kind of, you know, parallel with the floorboards. It's like a ready-built perspective tool.
5 seconds. And that is time.
All right, so we're sticking with the same pose, and now basically what you're doing is you're just asking yourself for every aspect of this drawing, and I really, even if it's kind of not finished or it's not looking quite right, drop the line drawing, it doesn't matter. You're just asking yourself, am I going to leave this the tone of the paper? Am I going to shade it in mid-grey, or am I going to use my kind of richest black? That's your only 3 options. A good tip is just squint, just close your eyes 90% of the way. It's like less information can come in, and your eyes are forced to kind of see things tonally a lot more. So it's really useful if you just kind of squint as you're looking at your image of Lydia on screen. Okay, shall we go back to Lydia?
Yes, and this is 15 minutes, the last 15 minutes of the session. Starting now.
So another thing that drawing mat is really useful for is it's our darkest tone. Lydia's got dark hair as well, so they'll probably be your kind of darkest tones. And we've got a kind of dramatic lighting. We've got that deep shadow behind, projected onto the wall. But also, if you look at Lydia's thigh, that kind of quad muscle, it's got a really great shadow. It's got a kind of highlight, like a little strip of a lighter tone on top, and then that kind of slightly darker shape coming underneath. All throughout, if you look at Lydia's armpits, there's a kind of shadow coming out there again, a kind of really pronounced muscle on the top of her shoulder. You're getting that light bouncing off. And, you know, just like the other ones, maybe you want to not go too early with your richest black. We've got kind of, what,
15 minutes. Oh, but it's about 40, yes, about 13 minutes left.
But 30 minutes left on this, okay? Which, compared to your other drawings, what a lifetime, okay? Got a whole a lifetime to pick out your tone. So maybe you just want to be thinking about light greys for now.
You caught me trying to do maths and work out what the halfway mark would be between timings.
And you know, you've got this line drawing, but you don't have to stick with it. I'm kind of just freestyling the shadow here. Some artists that are really great at using tone, like Poussin's Inkwash Studies, Paul Arago's, speaking of printmaking, Paul Arago's etchings with aquatint of fairy tales and things like that, just so luscious. You know, she was really influenced by Goya, who also is so good at creating drama. You know, all three of those artists, loads of storytelling in their work, and it's through the lights and darks that they really create a lot of drama, I think.
Just written those names, the Paul Rego and Goya, in the chat for Christine, who was asking about those names there. Susan she was sort of talking about how would usually erase mistakes, but actually isn't doing it this time. What is your, and I know this is sort of a sort of slightly controversial topic among different artists and teachers, but what is your views on rubbers and erasing mistakes and yeah, all sort of...
I would say, as a whole, I'm not really strict with it on anything. I'm not banning tools from the studio, but definitely for this one, because we don't have time to get caught up in those details, but also you can go over. We're building up layers of tone,
Yeah.
so you can absolutely, especially if you build slowly enough, it will kind of just still be there, but it will be less noticeable. And actually, it's nice to have the history of how your picture is made,
Sure.
still kind of present and still visible in that final thing. And you've already given yourself license to do the worst drawing of your life, if that's what needs to happen, and that's what you need to get out of your system. So as I'm squinting, Lydia's supporting arm, her right arm, it's, her flesh is the same color throughout her body, but actually it's kind of in shadow. And if you really squint, it's really dark. Like it's not as dark as the yoga mat, but actually if you just took that point and compared it to, for instance, the peak of her knee, the one that's kind of bent, it's so much darker. So out of my three tones, for sure, that's going to be at least the mid-tone. Coming back to your question about erasing, one thing you can do as a kind of different activity still with tone is you can get a block of charcoal, or you could do it with a pencil and just cover your whole page, then like rub it in with some tissue so you've got a kind of even coating of grey. And then rather than starting with white and just building tones on top, you can kind of push and pull. You can work with an eraser and your stick of charcoal and your pencil and draw with lights and darks kind of at the same time. And then you can change your mind and rub a bit out and then add a bit more. And that is almost quite a painterly approach. Another thing that's similar to that is if you have like brown wrapping paper, then you could do, rather than working with an eraser, you could get some like white chalk or white oil pastel or a light coloured drawing material and draw with light and dark at the same time. So rather than erasing and drawing, you're just kind of working with both mediums at the same time.
We're about halfway through here. Caroline's asking if you have any tips for avoiding smudging.
Well, it's quite hard to do the hover. Something I always do when I'm printmaking, one process I use is monoprint, and you need to be really careful not to press your paper in or you get these massive smudges. So sometimes you can make a little kind of protective mask, just taking a sheet of paper and putting it underneath. I've seen people do the bridge, hold your wrist like a little handcuff and try and stop it. But I think there's no one answer to that. When you're finished drawing, you can always give it a spray outside with fixative, especially if you're like working with charcoal.
Hairspray, right?
Hairspray you can also use.
You don't have, yep.
And that means that A, your drawing won't be rubbed off, and B, if you put it in a portfolio, it won't ruin another work as well, because you can, if it rubs off on another piece, I've definitely had that, where you kind of ruin two in one. I'm only just starting to think about getting that yoga mat in my darkest tone now, because I'm kind of happy enough with that it's going to be where I've kind of sketched out now. Tone is one of those things as well. Sometimes you have a preconception. You think you know if someone's got light hair or dark hair, or they're light-skinned or dark-skinned. So you think, okay, cool, well, I get it, I'll just draw it in that way. But you never know, like, when even a white wall, when there's no light shining on it, it becomes a very dark wall. And you get all sorts of strange things going on with, like, shadows and things that you think these two parts of the body are the same tone, but actually, if they're in different lighting, they're going to be really different. So it's really about really squinting and trusting your eyes, not your kind of memory or your expectations. And when you shade as well, maybe you want to keep in mind the direction that you're making marks in. So for instance, you can really see those lines of how the floorboards are kind of jutting out towards us. Maybe rather than doing the whole thing kind of bottom left to top right and just doing the same sort of hatching the whole of the drawing, maybe you want to follow those lines, and then you can suggest not just that they're grey, but the kind of the way that they're moving. And it's the same with the figure. Maybe if you're drawing that leg jutting out, you want to really, like, keep that integrity of how straight and kind of horizontal Lydia's right leg is. So maybe you want to be making marks that are really horizontal themselves, rather than just kind of drawing with random marks.
About 2 minutes left. Final 2 minutes. Jake here is asking about tips for faces and intricate parts such as hands, potentially not for this exercise, but for future reference. Whether you have any top tips.
I think probably what I'd say is, like, what I just said about going with observation rather than preconceptions, especially, like, maybe you've been drawing all day, or maybe you're drawing after a long day of work, or whatever it is, and you're a little bit tired. It's so easy to spend a lot of time just looking at your page, just looking at your drawing, because of course you know what a face is like, you know where the eyes are, you know where the nose is, you know where the mouth is. But actually, everyone's face is really different, and there is some weird shape, especially when the angle changes slightly, you get some really weird old triangles or things like that. So just really, really asking yourself, what is this shape in a kind of abstract sense, rather than, okay, well, I know this person, they've got big mouth, so here's the big mouth. Really, really forcing yourself to kind of question what you know about it.
Got about 30 seconds or so left.
So if you've been saving that darkest tone, then definitely go for it now. It's quite satisfying. So now is a good point as well to maybe just stand up. If you've been sitting down the whole time, maybe just stand up and just look at your drawing from a distance and just see, is there anything that jars? Have you got some really, 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 really long leg that just needs to be tucked in a little bit, something like that? Is there anything that just kind of jumps at you that you can just kind of feel in your gut that just needs adjusting, or something just needs to be made loads darker really quickly? Do you need to shade in Lydia's hair as your kind of final move?
And that is time. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lydia, and thank you, Jake. That was brilliant. Well done both. Now, we have a chance to look at some of your drawings. So, once we get those up, Jake, you should have a clicker
Yes.
somewhere.
Here's the clicker. All right. First of all, before we even look at Trisha's drawings, thank you guys so much for, first of all, just, engaging and just doing these. Really, this is, like a year of drawing classes that we've kind of done. Could have spent 5 sessions on each one of these aspects of drawing. And we've kind of done like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. It's like, it's actually quite challenging. And then, an extra thank you actually for being brave enough to share it with everyone. Trisha, I love the sort of freedom of that line work. I really get a sense of that Duchamp new descending a staircase as well with that figure in motion drawing. I like also how because it's kind of quite linear, the lines of the body kind of meld with the lines of the arms, and it becomes this kind of beautiful motion blur sort of effect that happens. Thanks, Trisha. Okay, I don't know your name, but I'm guessing it begins with the M. I love this pose. It's definitely my favorite pose of the day. And I really like the use of just the shadow, and that kind of line. And you've actually created a kind of extra bit of tension by having it a little bit slanted. It's actually made a sort of a real kind of dynamic quality to the drawing. But I just really like how with so little of the drawing, you've indicated so much about the space that Lydia is in. We know where the light's coming from. Mm-hmm. We know how far away the wall is. We know exactly where the floor meets the wall. So thanks so much. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, so I really like how I'm guessing. So I guess this is the tonal one.
Or mark making. Mark making. We've got the.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
I think.
So you've got your 3 different sorts of marks, which are all sort of linear in a way, and they've got a similar sort of energy and a kind of a sort of beautiful sort of franticness and ambiguity about them. But I like as well how you've drawn it a bit more faintly, then kind of gradually built up the image. Oh, I want to see the whole thing though. We've just got the detail. So thank you, Daily Painting. All right. So I can see it quite faintly. I think this is definitely the mark making one as well, because I can see those strong vertical lines coming down for Lydia's thigh and Lydia's arm, which I feel like is almost like a kind of symbolic representation for how strong that pose sort of felt. It was so kind of
rooting, isn't it?
Exactly. It was so stable, strong, sort of almost like confrontational or something. And you've kind of responded to it not just in a visual sense, but in kind of how that pose really felt. So thanks so much, Claire. Afsana. So this is the first one that we've seen colour, and especially with the movement. It just kind of adds a different dimension, doesn't it? I I like as well, you know, when people do multiple drawings on one page, they kind of, maybe not always consciously, it's multiple drawings, but it's also, when it's on one page, it's kind of one composition, and there's always an interesting kind of dynamic between how the different poses and things sit together. Sorry, were you going to say?
Well, no, I was just going to say, I don't know if this is it, but those pencils that had different coloured leads in one pencil, you know, and it changes as you go. I don't know if this is it, or if someone is using different coloured pencils, but it's a reminder that as the colours change as you draw.
Yeah, again, it's almost like, you know, could be a symbolic representation, because we've got something that's kind of always changing, always moving, and kind of very difficult to kind of grasp and nail down. It's kind of, you know, Lydia's always in motion. And so it's kind of the same, not just the line that's always changing, but it's kind of like rolling through the rainbow as well. Florence Eugenius and Jean or Jean. Oh my God, thank you so much for joining in. I hope it was fun. Really captured Lydia's energy there. So good. And again, I really loved the use of that shadow. Really, that pose is, you know, I told you I've worked with Lydia for a while, and I actually own a drawing which was done by a young artist of that pose, and it's seeing it again today is like just like brings back that memory. It's so fantastic the way you've got those kind of triangles both between the arms and the body and between the legs and the floor. Dianochka. Oh yeah, I love the in particular, I'd say the one that jumped out at me is the drawing for movement. I love that the way it's kind of outlined, in particular the nose and the kind of facial expression without any facial features, and so much kind of a character portrayed just through the kind of posture and the kind of way the figure's walking along. Really nice. Ooh, those kind of square marks are a really interesting one. I think if I listed 100 marks, I would never get to that one. You've really got your own kind of a personal sort of handwriting in the marks that you put down. And I like how actually you're thinking in tone. You're thinking about lights and darks, but it's all just kind of coming from the accumulation of all these tiny marks kind of adding up to create a sense of where the light's coming from and the shadow. How many more have we got, Will?
I think we've got a couple more. We've got a couple more in here, and we've got time for, so we're just coming up now, so I think we've probably got time for 2 or 3 more of these, and then we can...
Beautiful. I like how the shadow is not filled in, so it's all kind of part of the same language that builds up the form. And the same with the mat. That could, you know, we know that that's a black mat that Lydia is standing on, but I actually like that it's almost, you know, democratic in the way that the image is constructed, and also the kind of the sort of energy in that drawing from motion drawing, the amount of figures that you've got in, the amount of information, the amount of movement in. We know this was like a super slow motion drawing that we just saw. This could be like, you know, Oxford Circus, New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve. Oh yeah, so we're getting a little bit almost, I'd say, cubist on the one on the left. Certainly bringing it into abstract territory, especially as the way that the areas that you've just kind of quickly shaded in with the pencil, that you've kind of got those squiggles. They're not just necessarily about describing Lydia's form, but they're actually thinking about this drawing as a whole composition. I feel like, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Pam, maybe you did this drawing, got the line drawing, and then you started to say, okay, what interesting shapes are there in here that I can bring out? And ultimately, when you create a drawing, people aren't going to know exactly where the figure was, or it's the drawing that you're actually left with. That's the kind of artifact. So ultimately, that's kind of the most important thing.
Yeah.
Those squiggles are great as well. All right. Yeah. Again, beautiful drawing. Sort of, I like the way it kind of bends out a little bit. Like where the bottom of the feet are.
Sure.
It actually is. The heads are staying level, so it means that the figures are kind of growing. So we've almost got a sense of maybe the figures coming a bit closer to us. We're getting a kind of indication of a sort of space that the figure's existing in.
Probably time for one more.
Okay, last one. Trisha again. It might be the same Trisha. Maybe it's a different one. Yeah, really, really beautiful use of tone there, and also, like for instance, with that yoga mat, rather than drawing out a kind of solid rectangle, and then kind of that can be a bit, just kind of a bit dead if you just have like solid shapes. It is actually kind of kept alive a bit just by you've indicating where the tone is. We know that that's underneath the figure. We know that there's something there, but it's not kind of killing the drawing.
Amazing. Well, brilliant. Thank you so much to everybody who sent their work in, and please do continue to do so. We'd love to see it, and we'll sort of have a look at it throughout the week. Do have a look at Jake's Instagram and his website. So he's on Instagram, it is at Jake Garfield Art. And website is www.jakegarfield.co.uk. So do check out his work. If you've been inspired, do get involved with our Daily Doodle Challenge on Twitter. If you enjoyed today's session, or indeed any of the other sessions we've done so far, then do feel free to donate to the RA. You can do that at the below link. Next week, for our final Saturday Sketch Club of the series, we'll be joined by Emil Williams. But from today, thank you so much, Jake. Thank you, Lydia. And thank you to all of you for joining. And hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you, Will. And thank you guys for joining in.
Goodbye.